This election was Republicans' best chance in the better part of a century to capture the majority in the New Mexico House. Just a 3-seat pickup would have done the trick, but instead, it's the Democrats who are poised to pick up those seats, and here to help us sort it out, UNM political science professor and noted Denver Broncos fan Gabriel Sanchez is back. From the Albuquerque Journal, political reporter James Monteleone is up for air after a long campaign season. Attorney Laura Sanchez is back, hours it seems ago, after our election night coverage, and Jamie Estrada also found a few moments to recharge and return. Now, Jamie, Republicans, it could be argued, picked up 2 of the 3 main targets to have a seat change in our legislature. But my sense is Republicans were expecting more on this House side we're going to start with here. What do you make of that?
I'm going back to all of our conversations that we've had around this table with Dan Foley and Sophie and Laura and others that, when we went through the redistricting process, we said that, even with the court order decision, that Governor Martinez came out a winner out of that whole thing. And I'm not sure that that actually, came out that way. And I think we're trying to figure out how this happened. My read of many of these races, especially those that were on the bubble, those were really targeted. They seem to come in right at the performance that was computed there with out of redistricting. So they came right in. Some of them are real big surprises. The House seat 53 down in Las Cruces, Chaparral area. Rick Little, underperformed by 7.5%. That's a big surprise. While on the other hand,
and the result of that was to finish that thought of that particular race.
Nate Cote, former Representative Nate Cote, retook that seat.
Right.
But then you look at the Sharon Clodagh-Sillage. We're talking House District 4, prevailing as a Republican Navajo woman, winning over Ray Begay, the incumbent who was embattled because of a controversy there with his finances. And completely outperformed that race. I mean, she outperformed by 13.5% as well.
That's an understatement. Outperform is just really quite something. Let's get Gabe in here. You track a lot of this stuff, certainly locally, nationally. Thank you for cutting some time out for us here this week. You've been busy. That's for sure. Let's pick up on something Jamie started with, which was redistricting. Let's peel way back to that. The goal, of course, with any redistricting plan is more competitive races, better representation, or chances for better representation. In the overall, we'll get down to some districts here in a second, but in the overall, was that successful with this result?
I think so. I mean, I think you're right. In terms of the redistricting process, I think it played out like what most of us thought that it would based on the math. Right. Big picture, I actually wasn't surprised at all. I've been saying for weeks I thought the Dems would pick up a few seats, if anything, widen the gap. And I think the reason for that is if you take a look at most of the competitive seats, those were ones, there's about 7 that the Republicans picked up in 2010 with the big Republican wave. All those folks are freshmen. They really don't have name recognition yet. I knew there was going to be a big surge at the top of ticket towards Democrats with enthusiasm and turnout. So I wasn't surprised at all. I knew all along Dems were going to pick up a couple seats and that would be the end of the story. So I think folks got really engaged in the big money that was coming in, but it's still politics and it's still about the underlying math and the enthusiasm and turnout numbers, and I knew that was going to go towards the Dems. And got to remember, this is a state that's majority Democrat, right? And so when you have a big top of the ticket move like that, those underlying numbers don't change, and this is what you get.
I want to come back to that too, that top of the ticket influence. That's a really good point there. James, good to see you. Thank you for coming in, spend some time with us too. Redistricting, let's finish the thought on that and then swing to money. But on redistricting, is there anyone, even though things came out about where political professionals thought it would come out, any surprises to you from any of the districts that were reshaped? Did it markedly help somebody in some surprising way to you?
Well, I don't think that there were any districts that you would necessarily describe as a surprise because of redistricting. We talked briefly about that House District 24 and Conrad James and Elizabeth Thompson. Now, that's one that was recognized during redistricting as having a slightly more Democratic shift. As a result, Conrad James, a Republican in a seat that has been held by Republicans for a number of terms, lost by just over 1%.
Absolutely.
So I mean, there's an example of one district that redistricting did make a difference.
Sure. On the money side, let's swing to that. We just saw that on our screen, what you're just referring to, that very close race there, but that performance issue Jamie's mentioned as well, a factor there. Given what Gabe just mentioned about what was expected to happen, given the makeup of these districts, was money well spent here if your aim was to flip some seats to Republicans here, or was the money not enough? What can we expect next time?
Money was differently spent.
Yeah.
This season was, I think the estimates were something around $3 million in independent expenditures and super PAC kind of money was spent on races that hoping to change the outcome. In some cases that worked. In a lot of the cases, as Jamie mentioned, they followed performance, and it didn't have a lot of shit. I think there's going to be a lot of questions of whether or not that spending was effective, or if it just left us with a more partisan legislature than we had before, because there are certainly some hard feelings about the way these mailers that go out that from neither candidate, you don't have anyone to quite point the finger at, and so there's just a lingering grudge there.
Sure. Speaking of mailers, speaking of some of these House side pickups for Democrats, there was just mail flying all over the state. You look at some of these races. So I ask again, was money really that big of a factor for some of these? And I'd like you to talk about a couple of those House races that caught your eye as well.
Sure.
Where money was spent and still the result.
Well, on me, in terms of strategy, overall strategy for the governor's agenda, I think that there was a miscalculation on the Nunes seat, and to put basically Nunes, I think among Democrats, was seen as a supporter of the governor, and I think he has repeatedly said that he supported some of her agenda items, specifically the immigration issue, and that was one that I know Democrats had some real heartburn about. The strategy there became, let's support the Republican, which really peeled off a lot of support that otherwise Nunes would have had, and the Democrat ended up picking it up. I think that was one that we did not necessarily, I think the Democrats did not necessarily think we were going to pick up. We thought it would be a tough one, it would be competitive, but once there was so much money put into that race for the Republican, and there was support from the Republican, for the Republican, then it became, I think, in play for Democrats. I think there was also a couple of others. Richard Garcia, or Garcia Richard, up in Los Alamos was one that was a good outcome. She'd run before, so she had some name recognition. I still think the Cote one, I keep saying Cody, the Cote one was an important one.
And that was
it
House
did,
53.
Right, that's House 53. He had the name recognition from before, but there was some changes in terms of redistricting. And then what's interesting, if you look at it from a redistricting perspective, the extra seat that got created, the one that was pulled from, I think was formerly 68, used to be up in Mora County, San Miguel, and Taos, that got created sort of on the west side of Albuquerque, Bernalillo, and then I think it has some Sandoval possibly in it, but or mostly Bernalillo. Youngblood actually took that one, so that became a Republican seat. So I think that advantage went to the Republicans when it came to redistricting, because that was that really new seat that got created. So I'm not sure you can say that redistricting disadvantaged the governor. I think it was more a strategy of, spreading themselves too thin and not really picking out certain vulnerable Democrats to pick on. That would have been, I think, more effective.
Interesting. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but you could also argue that all the money that was spent was probably spent to help shore up some of these people who were vulnerable. Like if I'm looking at the numbers, Alonzo Baldonado, they didn't come after him so much, but his could have been competitive, but he ran a good race on his own. But the race that they was House 23 between Marcy Blaze and Paul Pacheco.
Right.
Pacheco looks like he pulled it out. I think there's still some
69
stuff
votes.
going on there, but it looks like he potentially could get that one. That's a hold because David Doyle had that seat before.
That's right.
So a lot of money went into that race, and I think that's perhaps where one that might have helped the Republicans hold that.
Sure.
Nate Gentry, and I know that they spent a lot of money in that one to help him, but he outperformed his race there. He did a good job, as usual. He's a freshman, but had a lot of visibility versus the rest of his freshman class.
Sure.
So I think that probably helped him too.
Sure. Gabe, the conservative side certainly was not the only game in town financially. Outside money did come in on the Democratic side. Folks don't talk about that too much. Was that impactful, again, maybe to Jamie's point, to holding serve versus really going out there and going after somebody, just shoring up the...
And I think if you take a look at the timing of it, I think that's exactly what happened. The liberal side didn't really start spending money until they had to. And I think that was really in terms of defense. It was just, okay, we got a couple folks in trouble. Let's tip it not only in terms of money, but bringing in some of the big guns, right? Some of the top of the ticket folks coming in to try to rally behind the troops kind of thing. That was all defensive. I think in terms of the strategy dynamic, one of the big questions was, did they spend too much money on the Senate side? That's where they spent a chunk of money. That's where all the action was. Should they have spent more time in the House? I mean, remember, the big scheme was, let's take back the House. If you look at where the money and the action was, it didn't really look like that. It looked disproportionate to the Senate. I questioned the strategy from the giddy up. I said, even if you win, even if you take out some of the big guns, you're going to get replaced with more liberal folks. And even if you do take the House, right? You still got the Senate that's going to be overwhelmingly Democrat. Are you still going to be able to push any of your agenda items? So big picture, I always thought the strategy seemed a little flawed to me, but I guess that's why I'm not paid the big bucks.
Yes, you are, actually. That's okay. But on strategy, looking forward in a changing demographic here in our state, our urban centers are puffing up. Our rural parts of the state are losing or hemorrhaging, depending on your point of view, population. What does that mean for strategy from let's take the Republican side first. Would this same strategy work the next cycle, in your view, if it worked, meaning in quotes certainly there, with the changing demographic?
No, I mean, I think New Mexico mirrors what's going on nationally. I mean, the population in terms of just the overall math of who's in play, who's likely to vote, the Republican Party is going to have to do a much better job of outreaching to communities that they haven't done a good job with. Racially and ethnically, we're talking about the Hispanic and the American Indian vote. They got problems in terms of gender as well. So when you just look at the state's demography, and those trends are only going to get more desperate as we look forward to the future elections, that's going to have to be a change in strategy. Pouring money on campaign ads and TV time is not going to solve the problem.
Sure.
It's got to be a much deeper strategy about platform. And I think until they figure that out, we're going to continue to see the push towards more liberal Democratic vote outcomes. That's just what the math says.
What's interesting about that, Laura, because I appreciate that what Gabe said because of the national stuff as well. But it seems to me for Democrats, there's a pretty sweet position being set up here when you're talking about new registrations, where they ought to, all that kind of stuff. The numbers are looking very good for Democrats in this state. Is there a way to fumble this? Or is there a way to screw this up?
Well, there always is.
There always
Isn't
is,
there?
right.
Well, I think that if you look back to what's happened in the last 12 years, even we go back to 2000. I think we were purple. We ended up in 2000 becoming red, and then you look at 2004, we were red. 2008, we were blue. So I think we've always been kind of right on the edge.
And as you see the map behind us
Right.
here, that's fascinating,
Right.
isn't it, to see that
Absolutely.
as a color palette, isn't it?
And if you look at the national electoral map, where this little oasis with Colorado of blue and then red around us, I think that Democrats learned their lesson from 2000 and 2004, where Democrats started to basically ignore the rural areas and sort of cede it to the Republicans. Say, okay, we're going to just assume that those areas will go red, and we're going to stick to the I-25 corridor. I remember in 2008 having this discussion with a lot of Democrats across the state and saying, this is not the right strategy. We have to look at the entire state, because there are pockets of Democrats in all of these different areas. Silver City, obviously Las Cruces, there was a huge change over there of a lot of different seats, also judicial appointments in the DA's office. So I think that it's been a progression for the Democrats in terms of changing that strategy to try to reflect the values that rural folks, we shouldn't just cede rural areas to Republicans, because some of those values, basically, some of the poor folks in those areas, a lot of the federal programs, those affect those areas as well. And I think that that's a messaging issue that's been progressing over time. I don't think it's just this election.
Sure, James, we're under a minute here. For Republicans, again, same question that Gabe, when you look at the changing demographics, what's the game plan from this point on? It can't be just about money. Let's take specifically the urban areas, Cruces, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, tilting Democrat hard now.
Clearly, I mean, Republicans have to be able to engage the cities, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Las Cruces, in a way that they aren't right now, this year particularly. Now, certainly Santa Fe has never been a place that Republicans have been eager to play. Bernalillo County, the city of Albuquerque, has long been seen as, in some ways, a tipping point, where north central New Mexico is counterbalanced by southeastern New Mexico, and there's lots of kind of natural offsetting, and Bernalillo County is where it changes. We're seeing this, in 2012, it was strongly Democratic. Republicans have to look at the way that they're engaging districts in Albuquerque and in the Albuquerque area, and see where they've got chances of pickups. Because looking at the map right now, I don't see a lot of clear ideas where we can.
It's going to be almost this Obama campaign-ish, block by block, house by house, not by zip code anymore. Right. You know what I mean? It's just much more nuanced than that at this point for the greater Albuquerque area. So we'll see how that plays out. Appreciate that. After the break, political strategist Jay McCleskey.